Hola, mi nombre es Adrián Domínguez Sandoval y soy atleta de Special Olympics México. Practico natación y hockey sobre duela. Y soy presidente del Consejo de Opinión de Atletas Líderes y seré su presentador el día de hoy. Bienvenidos a la serie de seminarios web para entrenadores de Special Olympics. Orgullosamente apoyados y presentados por Gallagher y en asociación con iCoach Kids. En este webinar estará disponible la interpretación simultánea en español. Para acceder a ella, solo debe hacer clic en el icono de interpretación en su pantalla y seleccionar la opción español. De igual forma, al final de la presentación, tendremos una sección de preguntas y respuestas. Nuestro webinar del día de hoy se titula Desarrollando a la persona en su totalidad. Y recuerden que el día martes 12 de octubre se estará realizando el taller para estudiar más a fondo este tema. El día de hoy tendremos a 4 muy buenos expositores que nos hablarán sobre este interesante tema. A continuación, quiero presentar a la ponente Jennifer Hansen. Y le presten mucha atención, que nos hablará sobre el desarrollo deportivo y el entrenamiento de atletas jóvenes. Jennifer tiene el privilegio de brindar apoyo, capacitación y asistencia a los entrenadores de los programas de Special Olympics en todo el mundo. Bienvenida, Jennifer.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank you so much for having me join you all today. I'm here to present to you on the topic of developing the whole person. And my area of the person that I will focus on is child, and how to adapt some of your coaching sessions to children with intellectual disabilities. So my name is Jennifer Hansen, and I help to manage the Young Athletes program for all of Special Olympics International. So my work takes me all over the world. I've been in this role for about 3 years. It's been a fantastic job. I have a background in social work, which has served me a great deal in this role. And I also have 3 boys of my own who participate in sport, all different sports. It's been an interesting time, and I hope that this all gives you solace. I know that we've had concerns about the effects of COVID on children's participation in sports. And I have to say that at least in my case, with my 3 boys, they've never been more excited about sports. They're ready to move, they're ready to be active, they're ready to try new things. So I hope by having this conversation with you all today We can motivate you to get out and work with some youth who could really use it right now. So I wanted to provide you with an overview of what you're about to hear. The goals for my presentation is to focus on a little bit on why Special Olympics has chosen to give a little bit more attention to coaching youth, tips for supporting youth, children with disabilities in sports specifically, and also give you a taste and sneak peek of our upcoming developmental sports youth sport coaching course. It's a mouthful. That will be out later this fall for you all to take and pass around within your organizations. This is where I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of Special Olympics. So, and our whole concept behind working with youth. So if you are a coach that's really familiar with us, bear with me for a moment, but you might find something in here you've never heard before. So typically a child can join Special Olympics at the age of 8 and start to participate in sport. That had been the case since we were founded as an organization. About 20 years ago or so, there was a lot of call from parents in particular for Special Olympics to start to support children at a younger age. And through that, developed this Young Athletes program that I mentioned at the top of this presentation. That's our Gross Motor Skills and Play program. It's offered all over the world. It's in schools, in communities, and in homes. It's been very successfully implemented. And because of that success, we created a problem for ourselves. And that was that we were seeing kids participate in Young Athletes and maybe not quite ready to move on to Special Olympics at age 8 because they needed to develop some more sport-specific skills, or emotionally they weren't quite ready yet, or most likely their parents weren't ready yet. Or it could be that we had young athletes on the older age, maybe 6 or 7, that had done Young Athletes a couple times and were bored and ready to advance their skills. So what we had done is created a new pathway through our organization. We said, sure, there will be those kids that will join Special Olympics competitive sport at age 8, and they can continue to do so. But if they're not ready, let's hold them in a place where we can teach them some proper sport skill development through what we call developmental sport. Developmental sport is for kids ages 6 to 12 with and without intellectual disabilities. And it gives them a chance to try different sports on a really low stakes level that gives them just this opportunity to do something they may never have tried before. I've seen kids through developmental sports give volleyball a try. And at the start of the session, they said they hated volleyball, and by the end, they loved it. So we gave that opportunity to our pathway of sport. If you're with Special Olympics, you say, wait a second, I haven't heard of this. We're slowly releasing out all these materials to each and every program and coach. So if you're hearing it for the first time, please don't be alarmed. The idea with young athletes and developmental sports is that maybe a child participates in our activities at this young age group and they move on as a competitor in Special Olympics or in another organization. Or they decide, I love sport, I'm more of a recreational kid, and they move on to more recreational opportunities with Special Olympics. Any way you slice it, the more we focus on quality sport skill development for children in this age group, the better and healthier their lifespan will be, whether they decide that they're going to participate in competitive swimming or they're more of an athlete that wants to do something like bocce. So I think this is a great opportunity. It's an excellent opportunity for Special Olympics to grow and to keep our athletes in the movement from the ripe old age of 2. Through our work, we decided to go to the experts. We really wanted to focus in on sports skills development for youth with the best partners we possibly could, with those people in the field that are on the that have cutting edge research and resources. So what we've done is partnered all over the globe with sport federations that are providing us with their resources on how they work with youth. And we have been taking those resources through developmental sports, through coaching children, and adapting them to our special needs population. We have a guide available, which I'll share after this call, that outlines everything I'm saying and more, and leads you to that landing page that has all of that rich information from our sport federation partners. And the other thing I mentioned is that we came up with a youth coaching course. For a long time within our organization's history, our Special Olympics Level 1 coaching course did, and still does, just meet the needs for coaching all athletes, childhood through adult. But our group decided to take a deeper dive and a focus in what are the needs of a child with intellectual disabilities. When they're young, what are their needs that are different from when they grow up? And how can we foster and encourage their sport skill development while keeping in mind that they're a child, not a mini adult? So we decided to create some resources with our consultant and partner, Dr. Thabo Huntley from Liverpool John Moores University, and his organization Prayer Coach. And we've been working with him since 2019 on this coaching course, and we're really excited that in the next couple of slides, you all are going to get a sneak peek to that resource. Okay, so I'm going to stop giving you history, what Special Olympics wants to do, and give you some takeaways. So say you are a coach with Special Olympics and you want to get some more engagement from your community. You want to get some more kids involved in your programming. Or you're a partner organization or a coach from another organization and you're saying to yourself, wow, I really want to incorporate children with intellectual disabilities or any disability within my coaching, within my team. How do I do that? Through our work with Dr. Huntley, we determined a couple of different things. And one of our top tips for recruiting and working with children with disabilities is to first, as a coach, set your own mission, vision, and value statement about what coaching children with intellectual disability means to you. But don't keep that mission, vision, and value statement private and to yourself. Share it with your greater community so that parents and families know that you're there and ready to support their children. That is one of the many tips we have in this course, and I'm going to let Dr. Huntley expound upon that a little further.
Coaching research often highlights the close relationship between our values and beliefs and our coaching practice. That is, the way we coach. Therefore, if we want to become more effective coaches at creating inclusive and empowering environments, it is important to consider the reasons why we coach, our values, and the ways these values meet the needs of our children with intellectual disabilities. To explore our values, it may be helpful to develop a vision, values, and mission statement. In doing so, it communicates to others the type of environments that we want to create as coaches. Given that children with ID are less likely to participate in sport and physical activity, a well-crafted, clearly communicated vision, value, and mission statement displayed on a website or on leaflets or on pop-up boards may be the first encounter children and their parents have with you and your club. This is an important consideration because how and what we communicate may go some way to help parents and children overcome fears or previous experiences of exclusionary practices. In addition, creating vision and value statements can be used to support the development and evaluation of policies and strategies aimed at the inclusion and empowerment of disabled children within sport and physical activity. A mission statement clearly states what you want to do. For example, as a coach, I would like to create an environment through which children with and without ID learn, develop, and connect through sport. A vision statement communicates what you would like to become. For example, I want to excite children about sport and physical activity. Values are considered by some to be like a moral compass that describes the behaviors that define the environment. For example, I would like everyone in my setting to respect each other. These are often very personal and may have emotional links, and so may require some extra thought. Now it's over to you.
I hope that video gave you a little glimpse into what you can do in your own coaching practice. I think activities like that can be fun and introduce creativity into your coaching practice. And I hope it encourages you to take our course when it comes out later this fall. The next set of tips we are going to provide is how to assess your environment so that you're creating the most inclusive coaching practice possible. When assessing your environment, we ask you to consider the physical, program, and social environment. And I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive into that now. So here's some tips for inclusion in sport. When you're reviewing your physical environment, so where you're physically doing your coaching activities, we suggest that you consider the accessibility, the equipment, the safety, and travel and access. I think to a lot of you, most of this seems pretty obvious. Of course, I would consider this in my coaching practice, but I'd like to dive in a little deeper about travel and access and a bit to do about safety. Consider a family coming to your practice and you're at a field on a major university or busy sport club. Everything that you can do to support the transport of that child from the parking lot with their family to the practice field is part of your coaching practice. If you can imagine a child who may have some sensory processing issues, get easily overwhelmed, or maybe likes to dart off and take away from mom or dad, trying to get through a busy parking lot, that can be a stressful experience for everyone involved. On top of that, what happens if the parent finally gets to the building and the signage isn't there and they don't know where to take their child? Then by the time they come to your field, they're grumpy, mean, upset, whatever. They're having a hard time. This all affects what you're going to do with your day. So what we're saying to everyone is when you're working, especially with children and families, is to give tons of communication and preparation for the environment that the children are going to be in prior to hosting your very first practice. Make sure there's signs everywhere, that there's volunteers to take the kids in, that the environment is welcoming from the very start. And that means when that car door opens and that child is ready to go. Additional tips for inclusion in sport include assessing your program environment. So Special Olympics is no stranger to the term divisioning, so I won't go over that too much. We also ask you to consider mastery, program size, diversity, sport and activity type, and autonomy. So when we speak about autonomy, I want to kind of focus on that point a little bit. What we're saying to you all is acknowledge that the child within your practice, whether they're verbal, non-verbal, new to sport, a seasoned veteran of sport, every child deserves to make choice in sport. And we want to encourage that as much as possible. That develops such a healthy lifestyle in sport moving forward, but also in their personal lives as well. So ask children questions about if they'd like to have a certain game for a practice, if they would like to serve as a leader for an activity, even if they simply want to lead a stretch at the beginning of practice. Anything that you can do to give each child or empower each child to have autonomy in their decision making. It will go leaps and bounds to developing a strong athlete. Keep this in mind as you do your coaching practice. We do in our course have tips of how to work with nonverbal athletes as well. So make sure to check that out. The final set of tips I'll give you is on the social environment. So how are you promoting your activity? How are you creating positive, trusting relationships? Do you, as a coach, understand the nature of disability and what is unclear to you? Are you providing role modeling, unique pathways into sport and on to the next level? What's your knowledge and skill level and openness to learn? Are you fostering autonomy, once again, and are you engaging the family? I would say that of these tips, engaging the family is most important. The family, especially with children who have a disability or intellectual disability, is vital and important to your coaching practice. There's many different experiences that a family may go through when they have a child with a disability. And if they've made it to your practice, that means they have a commitment to their child's health and inclusion into the sports world. It's your job as you go along this process with the parents to communicate with them how their child's doing, what sport you really see them excelling at, and also, and this is for my Special Olympics coaches, what they get to do next. If they've mastered, you've done developmental sports and you've focused on 3 or 4 sports, and you think they're ready for a competitive team, where are you going to refer them to? How are you going to get them onto the team? Maybe you can bring the family to a local competition so they can see the next phase that could be the rest of their lives with Special Olympics. Families have a lot going on in this time period when their children are young and newly diagnosed. And the more that the coach understands and supports the whole family, the stronger the child will develop their athletic skills. So focus on that family, and I think you'll have a really successful experience. Again, there are more tips within our coaching course that will help you to create a really positive and inclusive sporting environment for children. This developmental sports youth coaching course has a ton of modules. It's got 9 modules to it, and they're really engaging and fun, full of assessments and reflective questions that everybody can be involved in. Dr. Tabo Huntley and his colleague Amy Hardwick take you through loads of topics, including how to work with children with ID who may be nonverbal. What are safeguarding responsibilities that a coach should take? Loads of topics that we believe if our Special Olympics coaches and even coaches outside our organization take this course, they will be able to better handle and incorporate youth into their team and their coaching practice. It was so great to chat with you all today. I hope you got something out of it. I wish I could go on and on and on, but want to leave time for the other presenters. And I'll be happy to answer any questions either here today in the presentation or via email. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Jennifer. Ahora les quiero platicar que para un atleta la preparación pre y post de un evento es muy importante. Por ejemplo, yo soy atleta de 2 deportes. Uno de verano, que es natación, y otro deporte de invierno, que es hockey sobre duela. Para cada uno de mis deportes, Tengo que prepararme de diferente manera. Tengo que cuidar mucho mi dieta y lo que como. Comer sano y no tomar refrescos. Descansar bien y dormir 8 horas diarias. Para estar sano y fuerte. Tengo que concentrarme, ya que cuando hago natación, tengo que recordar las reglas. Y parámetros del deporte y no ponerme nervioso. Y cuando me preparo para hockey, es diferente porque es un deporte en trabajo de equipo. Y natación es individual. Para poder tener un buen trabajo, en equipo con mis compañeros, debemos respetarnos, llevarnos bien y aprender a que un equipo unido siempre triunfará. Y les platico esto porque a continuación tenemos la presentación de Colby Gott, mensajero de salud, quien hablará sobre el entrenamiento físico y emocional desde la perspectiva de un atleta. Le damos la bienvenida a Colby Gott, mensajero de salud, quien hablará sobre el entrenamiento físico y emocional desde la perspectiva de un atleta. Colby ha sido mensajero de salud desde agosto del 2020. Pero ha sido atleta de Special Olympics durante 9 años. Los deportes favoritos de Colby para participar son la natación, y las carreras de esquí alpino. También le gusta andar en bicicleta, hacer esquí acuático, escalar y surfear. Bienvenido, Colby. Welcome, Colby.
Hi, everyone. My name is Colby Gott. I am a Special Olympics health messenger from Maine. I've been doing Special Olympics for about 10 years. My favorite sports that I participate in are skiing and swimming. But not only do I ski and swim, I also do sports such as rock climbing, water skiing, sailing, and even surfing. I'm here today to talk to you about how being an athlete means not only physical fitness, it's also mental fitness. Fitness to me means that I get to be out in the world participating in sports that I like with my friends. First, I'm going to talk to you about physical fitness. When I think of physical fitness, I think of 3 different parts that come along with it. And those 3 parts would be exercise, hydration, and nutrition. When I think of exercise, I think of 5 different parts that come along with exercising. Those 5 parts would be cross training, strength training, training for your sport, balance, and stretching. What cross training means is you're not only participating in your sport, you're also doing participating in all kinds of other activities too. And that's good because really an athlete should be getting in 1 hour of exercise 5 days a week. Hydration is just basically choosing healthy drink choices. Try to limit sodas because those contain a lot of caffeine and sugar and will also rot your teeth. Your best bet most of the time is either water or flavored water. Now I'm gonna nutrition is choosing healthy eating choices. Try to limit foods with a lot of fat and sugar because those will lead to things that you will not want to have, such as obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. You should be getting in 5 fruits and 5 vegetables per day. Being an athlete means not only having a strong body, but also having a strong mind. Because if you're overly stressed all the time, you're not going to do well in your sport. Everybody has stress, so it's good to have ways to cope with it. I'm a good example. Recently, my parents got divorced, so that's probably been a hard thing on my life. So it's okay to ask for help. So some ways I've been coping with it are I went to see my doctor for it. I've been talking to one of my friends, and I've been talking to my mom and dad. I even went to some counselors and got some new techniques such as grounding. You do this for a time limit of about 5 minutes, and what it means is I'm escaping from the real world around me and I'm putting myself in the place I would want to be in, and I'm trying to think about what I would be sensing if I were in that place. For me, it would be in the water. I'm trying to smell and see and hear what I would be sensing if I were in the water somewhere. There's also deep breathing, which most of you probably already do, and sometimes I even like to raise my hand when I'm doing deep breathing. When I breathe in, I'm going up. When I breathe out, I'm coming down. And another thing I like to think about is blue sky days. That means you're not looking to do anything with your stress. You're just letting it blow by like you would a storm cloud outside, like, ooh. And as a health messenger, I promote videos educating other athletes about mental and physical health. I've made 2 exercising videos, a healthy drinking choice video, and a stress reduction video. In June of 2022, I'm supposed to be going to Orlando, Florida as a Special Olympic swimmer, so I'm utilizing all my skills to help prepare myself for that. Thank you for this opportunity for me to speak to you today.
Muchas gracias, Colby. Fue muy interesante tu participación. A continuación, le damos la bienvenida al doctor Khaled Khadri, quien hablará sobre psicología deportiva. El doctor Kadry es director clínico y psiquiatra, consultor de niños y adolescentes en Maudsley Health en Abu Dhabi. Dirigió el primer programa piloto, Mentes Poderosas, durante los Juegos Mundiales de Verano en Abu Dhabi 2019. Bienvenido, welcome, Khaled.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all very much for the opportunity. And I wanted to thank the organizers for the chance to be able to talk and communicate with everyone. I understand there's representation from over 80 countries. So this is quite a privilege and an honor to be talking to you all today. My name is Khaled Khadri. I'm a consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist. So in my day-to-day practice, I work quite a lot with young people and adults with ID and also related neurodevelopmental presentations such as autism and ADHD and anxiety and depression and so on. In a former, seems like a different life, many years ago, I was captain of the judo Egyptian national team. So I used to compete professionally in judo. And I was sort of in preparing for this talk, reflecting back on my own experience, both as an athlete and the type of coaching that I received way back when. I think the talk that I was hoping to give follows on very nicely from Colby's presentation. And essentially, I'll be sorry, Jeff, can we move on the slide? I will be talking about, almost an approach or a holistic approach to understanding self-care, which often starts with recognizing that we are stressed or that we're under pressure. Giving a bit of context and background to the connection between the mind and the body, and also giving you a few quick examples. And I think I'll make it easy that the takeaway is going to be really 5 key points or pillars, if you will, to self-care. So starting off with recognizing stress. I think as coaches, and certainly the talk that I'm giving applies to all of us, coaches, carers, certainly athletes, is the ability to recognize stress as a starting point. And sometimes stress presents differently for different people. Sometimes people become less chatty and less talkative. Sometimes they become over chatty and talkative. Often anyone who's experienced stress will say that they sometimes avoid people or become a bit isolated. Life becomes too much to manage. Sometimes it's about not really looking after our appearance, or sometimes neglecting personal hygiene. Changes in appetite is a very common presentation as well, either going off food or sometimes overeating and indulging in possibly unhealthy eating habits. Change in energy levels, either becoming less active or overactive, and certainly losing interest in things that we used to previously enjoy. So, as athletes, it might be that we used to enjoy going out with the team afterwards for a bite or doing certain activities. And sometimes you might find that some of the athletes or even ourselves as coaches or carers are no longer enjoying activities that we used to previously enjoy. Sleep is another important measure or parameter of stress. And often it can take different forms. One is difficulties falling asleep. The technical term is initial insomnia. It's because we've got quite a lot on our minds and we're occupied or stressed about things, we find it difficult to fall asleep. Sometimes when we do sleep, it's an interrupted night sleep. And sometimes it's waking up early, sometimes earlier before the time set that you're expected to wake up, and certainly feeling a bit irritable, a bit moody. So this is not an exhaustive list, but I think in a straightforward list for all of us to be able to be sort of mindful, either within ourselves and within yourselves as coaches, and certainly within your athletes. If you notice that any of these are changing, their talkativeness, they're a bit more moody and so on, then it's grounds to think maybe this person might be experiencing a bit of stress in their personal life. The next slide, please, Jeff. So I wanted to briefly sort of make the connection between the mind and the body. And I think it's now common knowledge everywhere that people will have heard this term of CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy, for stress and anxiety. And these are the fundamental components of what CBT is all about. And it's the understanding that our thoughts are very much linked to our feelings. So if I have a certain thought, I think, my teammates don't like me because they haven't passed the ball to me, or in a team sport, or I think that people are excluding me from some event, whatever the thought might be, that creates a certain feeling in the athlete. And then the feeling then leads to certain behaviors. So I either isolate myself, or maybe I become more irritable with some of the teammates or with the coach because he didn't choose me for a particular event, and so on. And those feelings then lead to certain behaviors, and the behaviors that I then do reinforces the thought that I have. That connection between thoughts, feelings, and behavior really is a key almost formula or understanding of how stress develops within the person. So you've got two diagrams that say the same, the feelings, almost the diagram on the left then talks about how you can break that cycle. And certainly a lot of therapy will utilize these principles of how you can break the chain of that cycle, either at the thought level. So if I get feelings of stress, and I feel, for example, I can't manage this, sometimes what we can do to support the athletes is, I am able to manage these feelings, which then leads to, improved mood and how I feel about myself, which leads us to then become almost inspired or motivated to engage in helpful thoughts. And then we can be able to do some of the behaviors that I'll talk about in the next couple of slides that then make us feel a bit better in ourselves. So that connection is really important. Again, as I say, for coaches, for carers, and for athletes to really grasp the concept of our thoughts inform or lead to certain feelings, and those feelings drive us to act in a certain way and lead certain behaviors, which then further reinforces our thoughts. Now, next slide, please, Jeff. Now, there's a bit of a, well, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's actually couldn't be more true, that we need to be able to, as coaches, you need to be able to look after yourselves before you can look after anyone else. And that's the cliche in my field of work, is before you can, you need to be good to yourself before you can be good to anyone else. The reason being, there are, when we are talking about self-care and when we're talking about managing stress or coaching the athletes to be able to manage stress, there's sometimes two, almost two considerations. It's a balancing act. There's whatever stress that's going on in a person's life and the capacity to manage that stress. Now, sometimes there is genuine increase in stress. I think Colby was saying, a certain life event in his life has raised his stress levels. And we are all none of us are immune to stressful life events in our lives. So sometimes the stressful levels sort of increase in our lives, but sometimes it's the usual day-to-day, but our capacity to manage is reduced because we are not looking after ourselves and because we're not engaging in self-care. And so the differential seems that actually we have so much stress in our life. The reality is the stress is the same, but it's our capacity to manage the stress has reduced. So self-care is vitally important, and being kind to oneself is a key sort of in that process. Now, there's also another principle in medicine, or certainly in interventional medicine, where when we're teaching medical students, we would say, you know, see one, do one, teach one. And I would strongly recommend that a lot of the, or some of the techniques that I'll be talking about, that you as coaches practice those yourselves, on yourselves. So, you know, hopefully this talk will serve as the C1. I would then strongly recommend that you all do one. So, you know, a lot of the 5 pillars, if you will, of self-care, that you actually do it yourself, because there's nothing more convincing to when you start coaching the athletes, just as much as you are experts in the particular sport that you are coaching them in, whether it's basketball or swimming and so on, that you can also coach them and you become a bit more of an expert in self-care, so that when you do pitch these things to the or these techniques to the athletes, that you have actually done it yourself and you've experienced the emotions and experienced the benefit yourselves. So the first exercise, or one of the exercises that I'd like you to do in your own time, is this concept of looking through your day and writing down what activities that you feel that are currently in your day that are nourishing, uplifting activities, and you write those down. And also write down draining or depleting activities. And it's a very helpful and simple exercise to do, almost 2 columns of nourishing and uplifting activities and draining, depleting activities, and making sure that throughout the day you are more engaged, or where possible, able to do more of those nourishing, uplifting activities versus those draining, depleting activities. And it's also an exercise that you can do with athletes that's really helpful, just to get a sense of all of, you know, if you find that most of the athletes' day is filled with depleting and draining activities, then that's an important piece of information that you as a coach would want to know, and you can think together of what sort of nourishing and uplifting activities they might be able to do. And this is, you know, therapy light, if you will. So it's certainly something within the remit of you coaching the whole person, not just the sport that you're doing. Next slide, please. So this is really the takeaway message. If you remember nothing of this presentation, this is the Venn diagram that I'd really like you to remember and hold in mind, are the 5 pillars that are key to self-care, as I say, in all of us, myself included, all the coaches, the carers, the athletes. And one of them is physical health choices that we can make, emotional well-being, mental well-being, social, and spiritual. Now, it's important that we think of, again, the theme of the talk today is holistic, or dealing with the person as a whole. And all of us will be, you know, all of those points, our physical health, our emotional health, our mental well-being, our social, so being social beings, and spirituality will come to athletes and coaches alike in different proportions. So it doesn't mean that you have to do all of those 5 every day, because then that becomes more stressful than helpful. But I think keeping those in mind, and certainly keeping those in mind when thinking about your athletes, is important, because then you can zone in on some of the things that you think are feasible or practical for the athletes to do in their day-to-day. And then just making sure that we do those to the best of our abilities, or to the best of the athlete's abilities. So starting with physical health. Next slide, please, Jeff. So certainly the examples I'm giving are just things to almost get you thinking creatively. So this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but it's just examples to start to get you thinking about conversations that you can have with athletes. And as I say, the see one, do one, teach one. I think doing this yourself will only serve, I think, both you as coaches and athletes, because then you speak from experience, having done some of these things. So having structure to the day, getting proper rest and sleep, almost a routine of being in going to bed at the same time, waking up in the same time, is really helpful. Obviously, this is the context of Special Olympics, so remembering to stay active and exercise, and making sure that they're eating healthy foods, and obviously staying away from alcohol or drugs. So really simple, straightforward structure to the day, regular times for sleep and for food, making sure that the food is healthy as much as possible where we can, and making sure that we stay active and having exercise. Next, please. So social health or social connectedness, I think it's really important, particularly given the last year or 2 years that we've had with the pandemic and the limited connectivity we've had with others, to stay in touch with a network around us. And this network could be family, could be friends, could be teammates, any sort of, it could be the community that we live in. So making sure that athletes stay connected, and certainly not to feel isolated, is really important. Making sure that athletes share their experiences with others. There's sometimes, and I want to thank Colby for sharing his experience, that sometimes people feel a bit reserved, or maybe not confident enough to share some of their stresses and worries with those around them. And I think as coaches, it's really important that you make the athletes feel that they can talk to you, or talk to their network of confidants, and that you encourage the athletes to allow others to support them and their family. So it's really important that athletes get the message that it's okay for them to come to you or others with their concerns, and that there will be help provided to them. Next, please. Emotional well-being. I couldn't be more important. All of us will tend to have, me included, times when we'll see our day half full, times when we see it half empty. And I think, again, as coaches, it's really important to try this out yourselves, and then you can guide some of the athletes through it, of writing things down that we are grateful for. And sometimes, certainly in my clinical practice, when you ask, sometimes the difficulties come so much easier than the things that we're grateful for. And so it's just helpful as an exercise to remember and write down and keep a journal of things that we are grateful for, our family, our health, our support systems, and so on. We can sometimes, learning something new is always good for our emotional health and well-being. whether it's photography, drawing, playing an instrument, learning guitar, learning drums. These are all things that are really nourishing activities that are helpful for our emotional well-being. Making playlists and just really having fun. It seems exceptionally simple, but it is. Journaling in and scheduling in fun activities will help us deal with stress and emotional difficulties, and certainly help the athletes. Mindfulness. So we as I say, the talk follows perfectly. Colby spoke about grounding techniques. Mindfulness is very similar. So when our minds are sometimes overactive with concerns about worries that we might have, stresses in our day-to-day, things that worry us, it's always helpful to be grounded in the moment and be mindful in the activities we do. And sometimes, for example, if you ask yourself now, if you live in a house that has a garden, or if there's a garden, do you know what color the flowers are that are surrounding your house? Or have you noticed the color of, the building next to where you live, and so on? A lot of us will go about life and not really take in a lot of the things around us. And in mindfulness, we teach, or you can teach the athletes to slow things down and really take in, things they can hear, things they can smell, things they would see. And in that sort of couple of minutes where they are doing mindfulness and grounding techniques, the stresses and worries tend to dissipate around them. And it's as much, the more mindful activities we can do, the more breaks, if you will, athletes can have during the day to be able to just step back from the stress and the worries that they have. And being, teaching them to be kind to yourself and think positive thoughts. So one exercise is, if someone comes in and says, and they're being hard on themselves, you would say, if you were a friend, what would you say to your friend, and how would you support them? So being kind and thinking positive thoughts is also a very helpful exercise for mental well-being and mindfulness. And I think the last one is spirituality, and this will take different forms in different cultures and different belief systems. And I deliberately kept it very broad. So whether it's yoga, meditation, a particular faith or belief system that athletes have, I think the idea that believing in something, or believing in something bigger, if people follow a faith, or having a time to become more spiritual and reflective, is also very healthy. And again, as a coach, it might be that you practice this yourselves, feel the benefits, and then you'd be able to relay this to or encourage athletes to do the same thing. But it sort of incorporates all of the things that we mentioned earlier. So, spirituality, relaxation, yoga, meditation, prayers are all really helpful tools, if you will, in your bag of tricks as coaches, to be able to suggest for athletes with regards to their self-care. So that's it. I wanted to end on that sort of what I call 5 pillars of self-care. And as I say, if the takeaway from my talk, hopefully, is those 5 things. So when you are, as coaches, dealing with your athletes, if you keep those 5 pillars of their physical health, their emotional health, mental well-being, how they are socially, and think of sort of a spiritual angle to it. I think this is a holistic way to be able to support the athletes as whole individuals, rather than sort of particular bits. I hope this was helpful. And I'm, again, as with the rest of the panelists, happy to take any questions at the end. Sorry, the last, one last slide is also that you as coaches and athletes know that there is professional support, or there's always more support out there, that things, don't, they're not limited in their options, if you will, and that, there are the strong mind techniques that I'm sure that's been circulated in various channels, reaching out to local, both you as athletes and, as coaches and athletes can then reach out to, mental health services if needs be, or other support services, if you feel this warranted. And also sort of making sure that there's communication between, you as coaches, the athletes, their carers, maybe professional bodies, and having access to online resources. So it's, again, important for you as coaches and athletes to know that there is a wider support system around the both of you that you can all reach out to, that will be there to support the system. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to answering any questions that anyone might have. Thank you.
Sí. Ahora, muy interesante tema, Khaled. Gracias. Nuestro siguiente expositor es Heidi Stanish con el tema de acondicionamiento físico. La doctora Stanish tiene experiencia en actividad física adaptada y se especializa en la promoción del ejercicio y la condición física entre personas con discapacidad intelectual y del desarrollo. Welcome, Heidi. Bienvenida. Heidi, adelante.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm so happy to be here today. I know that we're running a little bit over time, so I'm going to move through and cut things down a little bit for my own slides. I hope that's okay, but I'm very, very happy to be here. And I will say that over my many years of experience promoting physical activity and fitness and exercise among people with intellectual disabilities, I must remark that no organization, no human being, no group has been more impactful than Special Olympics in changing the lives of people with intellectual disabilities via sport. So though I'm here today to talk to you briefly about physical conditioning and exercise training for athletes, I will acknowledge very clearly that it is you, the coaches, who are doing the hard work and making the change. So I'd like to lead with that. Just to follow up, it's very clear that the research supports, and we just heard from our previous speaker, that it's really a combination of both the physical and the mental that allow our athletes to optimize their sport performance and their health. I will be focusing on the physical conditioning piece, and in the interest of time, will jump right into that. There are many benefits of physical conditioning. The first and foremost, thanks Jeff for advancing that slide, is physical fitness, health-related fitness and skill-related fitness. We know that fit athletes are better athletes. They're healthier and they perform better. So with physical conditioning, and what I mean by that is exercise training to achieve a level of fitness, our athletes will perform better in their sport. We also know that fit athletes have a reduced risk of injury, right? Fewer injuries, and also a quicker recovery from injuries if someone does get injured. So a reduced risk and a faster recovery. We also know that athletes have better technique when they're conditioned. So for example, an athlete who is stronger and has a greater flexibility is likely going to have better technique in, for example, a golf swing or a tennis serve or a gymnastics trick. we know that fit athletes have less fatigue during practice and play, which means that they can play longer and they can play harder, which is what we're looking for to optimize performance. We also know that fitness leads to improved health and quality of life. So reduce risk and prevalence of chronic disease in fit athletes. And we know that chronic disease is much more prevalent worldwide in people with intellectual disabilities, as well as improved quality of life and increased self-confidence. Advanced slide, please. So essentially, we know that physical conditioning can help athletes run faster, throw farther, jump higher, train longer, and hit harder. So plain and simple, as coaches, you have an important role to play in terms of ensuring that your athletes are physically conditioned enough to perform their best and do that safely and successfully. Next slide, please. There are many components of fitness, and I'll ask you to take a moment right now and think perhaps what components of fitness are most important to the sport that you coach, to your athletes. Because of course we have general fitness for health, and then we also have sort of more performance or skill related components of fitness. Some of these will be a review to you, but muscular fitness, muscular strength, and endurance are one component of fitness that can be achieved through physical conditioning. Balance, body composition, speed, and agility are very important for athletic performance. Endurance, aerobic endurance, the ability of our heart and lungs to pump the blood through the body so that we can go longer and harder and recover well. Flexibility, the range of motion of our joints, as well as coordination, hand-eye coordination, foot-eye coordination, and power. So these components of fitness underlie sport performance. And when we think about physical conditioning and where you might target your programming, you may want to start with a general conditioning program to improve the strength and flexibility and aerobic capacity of your athletes. And then you may also want to think about some of those more nuanced or skill-related components of fitness that really, really underlie and are the backbone of your sport. So for example, gymnastics and dance rely heavily on balance and flexibility. Maybe you have a track athlete where speed and perhaps agility, soccer or football, where moving left and right, and you may want to focus more on agility. So these are some of the components of fitness, and I'll go more into this in the workshop next week. Advanced slide, please, Jeff. The one thing that as coaches, I mean, you know the value of practice for performance for your athletes. Well, physical conditioning is the same and training is the same. It must be something that is purposeful, meaning that it has goals and outcomes in mind, that it's planned, well planned and organized, and that it's consistent, meaning that it's ongoing. Physical training, exercise training should not be just about leading into a competition and ensuring that your athletes are fit enough and prepared enough for competition, but it needs to be year-round, ongoing, so that someone can achieve that state of health and optimal performance. And it must be something that can be both within your practices as well as outside on their own. All right, go ahead, Jeff. Getting buy-in from your athletes. This is really important. We know that engaging people in fitness and exercise training is difficult to do globally, right? We wouldn't have these global epidemics of chronic disease and obesity, et cetera, if everybody bought into this. But as a coach, you can create a culture of fitness through ensuring that your athletes are aware of that association between training and fitness and their performance and health. Being a good role model and being fit and active yourself and engaging in vigorous physical activity at practice and outside of practice. Involving families is also very important typically for our athletes. Goal setting is a really critical way to motivate athletes, keep people on task, and monitoring those goals through assessing fitness and fitness outcomes. And we have resources at Special Olympics to do that. Exercise should be fun, it should be social, but we can have high expectations for our athletes as well. Go ahead, Jeff. So in terms of striking a balance, as you think about physical conditioning for your athletes, we must consider the age of the athlete, the particular sport that they're training for, and also their level of development, their developmental level. Because we want exercises and drills to support athlete development, but also be safe, right? So the balance here is that we don't want to demand too much and overtrain our athletes, because that could lead to injury and illness. But we also don't want to demand too little of them, because they won't be prepared to compete optimally, and they could also get injured. So we want that to be a good balance of working hard, but not overtraining. Last slide, please, Jeff. So we do always have to remember that we are working with athletes with an intellectual disability here. I want to be clear that the training principles, which I'll review next week more in my workshop, and the expectations for an athlete with an intellectual disability are the same as a non-disabled athlete or a typically developing athlete. But we may need to make some tweaks and accommodations around teaching athletes to monitor their exercise intensity, simplifying those goals, using visuals and extra practice time so that athletes really know proper techniques and can train safely. Jeff, last slide is just resources. I want, if you could just pop that on. I want you all to know that on our fitness site on Special Olympics, we have lots of resources around training, physical training, exercise training for coaches. So please go there to the resources Special Olympics page for fitness. I'm gonna finish there, recognizing that we're tight on time, Jeff. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, doctora Stanish. Ahora vamos a hacer una sección que les gusta a mucha gente. Vamos a hacer la sección hermosa que se llama preguntas y respuestas, pero yo les voy a hacer las preguntas. La primera pregunta a Jennifer Hansen. ¿Tiene alguna recomendación para la transición de los atletas de los deportes de desarrollo a los deportes recreativos?
I can answer that question. I think I have a recommendation for transitioning any child into any level of sports, whether it's recreational or competition. And that would be to, as you host your practice sessions with the families, is to educate them as they go along as to their child's progress, how things are going. What if you're doing multi-sport, what sports they're enjoying the most, what you think they might be interested in doing in the future. Of course, you take the child's thoughts and opinions into account as well. What do they enjoy doing? And I would suggest at the end of your developmental sports session or your coaching practice session with the families is to have a small meeting or event where you explain the next level. If they are in Special Olympics, where do they transition to? What teams are locally available for them to join? Perhaps you take your team on a field trip to see a Special Olympics event. I think that's the best way, is to sit down with your families and give them a really good overview of what comes next for their child. It sounds really simplistic, but you'd be surprised how many times that step is missed. So that would be my suggestion.
Muchas gracias, Jennifer. Ahora, segunda pregunta, ahora para Colby, Gott. ¿Cómo equilibras tu entrenamiento físico y mental para poder enfocarte en ambos?
Well, I'm a very physical person. I like to do things like jumping on trampolines and running and platform swinging, so I get plenty of physical fitness in every day. mental fitness, I don't really have an even balance of physical and mental fitness. Mental fitness, I don't get as much in unless I'm going through a lot of stress. So lately I've been a little up on my mental fitness, but don't really have much of an even balance. Thank you for the question.
Ahora tengo una pregunta para el doctor Khaled Khadri. ¿Cómo podemos identificar y acercarnos a los atletas o sus familias sobre la necesidad de un cuidado personal adicional?
I think if I'm reading it correctly, the question is, what can an athlete do that's struggling to relax on and off the court when feeling pressure from home and in the context of competitions? So can you do as a personal coach to help the athlete in the situation? I think a lot of the work that we've done over the last couple of years is really embedding the strong minds techniques that coaches can use or encourage athletes at least to use both during the competitions, but also in their day-to-day life. So, and some of these are, I mean, it'll be interesting discussions that I will have with the SOI to see which of the programs have strong minds programs available in them. And if not, then we'll certainly make concerted efforts to make sure that as many countries and as many programs have strong mind teaching and training for the clinical directors, but also for the coaches and the athletes. And essentially, it draws on a lot of the 5 pillars that I spoke about. So, but in the moment, people can exercise, the breathing techniques that Colby so well demonstrated. There's stretching exercises. There's thinking positive thoughts. There's also, strong messages that we can tell ourselves. So there's a number of techniques that can be used, but I'm sure that the strong minds principles can be shared, and I'm more than happy to send these out to the coaches and certainly the clinical directors in all the programs. And it is designed for that purpose, for the purpose to be able to support athletes and coaches if someone is feeling pressure and stress in the moment, both on the pitch and in their personal life.
Thank you. Ahora, la última pregunta, la más fuerte, es para la doctora Heidi Stanish. ¿Podría recomendarnos cómo crear una cultura positiva de fitness para los equipos deportivos de Special Olympics?
Thank you. Yes, I think it all starts, I think developing a culture of physical conditioning and fitness starts with expectations, that we have to have the same expectations of our athletes with an intellectual disability as we would any athlete, that athletes are expected to be prepared to practice at their optimal, at their peak performance. And so coaches can play a role in increasing those expectations of athletes so that they also expect that of themselves. Additionally, I think creating a culture comes with goal setting for teams and for individuals around a level of physical conditioning, both participation in physical conditioning, how often, how hard, how long, but also doing some assessment, pre-season and post-season and mid-season, so that athletes are able to see how they're improving or not improving, which can be very motivating to athletes to see that, wow, if I train more frequently or train this way, I can get stronger, I can improve my balance or my speed. So goal setting and role modeling, of course, using our Special Olympics resources for teams that exist, as well as, again, making it a team culture, using peers, using partners, using families, to build the idea, the concept that physical conditioning is a really vital component of not just performance, but overall health. So, and coaches also, and I'll finish with this, can play a role in really building conditioning into their practice and into their seasonal plan, as opposed to seeing it as an add-on, something that we sort of do that's extra, but it becomes part of that entire, training plan, and involving athletes in monitoring their own fitness and their own intensity, as well as making it social and fun to the maximum extent possible.
Muchas gracias por sus respuestas. Bueno, muchas gracias por sus respuestas. Ahora los invitamos a todos los participantes a responder una breve encuesta que ven a continuación. ¿Qué tema les gustaría para el webinar? ¿Les gustaría ver para el webinar número 6? ¡Voten! Hemos llegado al final de este webinar, pero les recuerdo que el próximo webinar será muy interesante en el tema de la filosofía del entrenamiento. No se lo pierdan. Gracias a todos los que asistieron al seminario web, gracias a nuestro socio presentador Gallagher y al socio de apoyo iCoach Kids. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.